Finally here tonight, the one you've been waiting for. Visiting fellow columnist, podcaster and GB News regular, Ralph Schoellhammer joins us from Europe. Thank you for getting up so early to speak to us, Ralph.
Anytime, Alexandra. It's always great to be on with you. It's one of the highlights of the week.
Same for us as well. Look, a lot has been said about UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's war on free speech, but the European Union has been busy writing angry letters to Elon Musk as well. Twitter is a social media platform based in the US, and the US, as we know, is a nation with a famously liberal view of free speech. Does the European Union have the same respect for free speech as America?
Well, let me ask a counter question. Who does still have respect for free speech? I mean, if you look at the things that unfolded over the last couple of years, we know from the Twitter files, right, that Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi have worked through in great detail, that the US government was leaning on social media companies to suppress certain information. We have now what's going on in the UK, which is just the most blatant way. And then, as you just mentioned, you have the European Union, who apparently is of the opinion that they can decide whether a US citizen is interviewing somebody who's running for the presidency and was the former president, because, hold on to your seats, it might cause harm for Europeans who watch it. I mean, it can happen, right? Imagine you turn on your TV, you turn on your computer, and then you see or hear, because it was a Twitter space, so that's only audio, you hear Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I mean, there is a risk that people will just jump out the window or hang themselves, or you name it. So the European Union is just taking their responsibility to protect very, very seriously here.
That if people heard Elon Musk and Donald Trump talking sensibly and calmly, that they might think that, yeah, I might vote for Donald Trump. Maybe that'd be a good idea. But the Europeans are telling us that social media has caused the riots and that free speech needs to be curtailed to restore public order. Now, Ralph, did social media cause this civil unrest in Europe, or have politicians put us in this position?
I would actually say the exact opposite. I think in many ways social media acts as an antidote to riots, because if people feel that they can voice their concern, that they can voice their anger, I would argue they are much less likely to go out into the streets. They're much less likely to resort to violence. It is if the only alternative that is left is doing something instead of just saying something, that people will turn to action. Now, of course, the other problem that underlies the riots is that people do justifiably say, we told you for 40 years we don't like that policy. I mean, we have polls going back to the 1980s that said we want less migration. We are worried about cultural cohesion. We are worried about social cohesion. Social trust is going down. This is not working. This is not working. But the political class, they put their fingers in their ears and said, nah, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And of course, now social media alone is not the solution, let's put it this way, because of course, at some point people get frustrated if they tell you something over and over and over again, and you never do anything. The argument that is being made in Australia, in the US, in the UK, that there is kind of a uni-party system, that you vote for the quote-unquote conservatives, you vote for the left-wing parties, but at the end of the day, you always get left-wing policies. That is correct. And if people feel they cannot affect change at the voting booth, they will try to find different ways to do it. I have a lot of sympathy, might be the wrong word, but I do understand that at some point the patience of the European people, or let's call it the native European population, the same in the UK, of course, and the same in the United States, is wearing thin. So again, I might not agree with the actions, but honestly, we were told we must understand BLM. We were, after 9/11, 23 years ago, we were told we must understand why the Muslim world is enraged about the West. Well, maybe it's time to also understand why the native Europeans, the native Brits, the native Australians are angry, because they have their reasons as well, and I think many of them are justified.
The Western leaders are basically saying, let's shut everyone up as quickly as possible. It's almost like they're confused that the idea of silence, when you've duct taped everyone's mouth shut, is the same thing as saying we approve of your political ideas and policies. But Ralph, is this, particularly in Europe, I mean, people forget because it's been 100 years, but they were quite keen on censorship during all these socialist and communist and fascist regimes. Is this falling back onto old habits for these governments, where they've just dragged up their World War era technology, going, hey, we'll just keep everyone quiet and it'll all be fine?
Well, I think the authoritarian temptation is always there. The reason why I would define myself as a conservative, I think the kind of a key hallmark of being a conservative is that you're always very suspicious about theories that explain the entire world. Because what you saw in socialism, what you saw with fascism, and I think the same is, of course, true with multiculturalism, is this idea that there is one theory that explains everything. But once you supposedly understand how the world and society works, you just need to implement your technocratic solutions. So democracy does get in the way. Free speech does get in the way. So the solution is everybody shut up and let us do what we want to do. And I think this is what they want to do. And the second part, which is equally important, I believe, is, of course, that you and I are in a very quote unquote lucky situation. Because we have now our I told you so moment. Because both you, I, and other friends of ours in the alternative media have been predicting this for decades. And now we can justifiably say, we told you this is going to happen. But imagine you're on the other side. So you believed absolutely in the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, multiculturalism, you name it, open borders. And now all of this is failing. All of this is crumbling down. So what is the more kind of almost, I would say, natural reaction? Will you say, all right, I was wrong for 30 years, I apologize, I changed course? Or will you say, oh, you guys all shut up. If you just wouldn't point out my flaws and the failures, then they wouldn't happen. And I think we're in the second stage of this.
I think what I want is a shirt that says, I was right. I'll get you one as well, because we need to wear that. Almost every single thing that we have said for the last, well, for me, about 15 years has been correct, and yet we keep being called conspiracy theorists, whatever. Look, if you look at the professionally printed signs carried around, particularly in the UK at these so-called anti-racism rallies, they bear the socialist raised fist and the message, and I quote, smash fascism and racism by any means necessary. Now, Ralph, is there a professional and organised socialist movement stirring up civil unrest? And if so, why?
Of course there is, and we know this. I think, again, this is not a conspiracy. We know precisely what kind of NGOs are funded by governments, and these NGOs in turn then support these quote-unquote grassroots groups that go out on the streets. I mean, again, the same, by the way, happening with illegal migration. We know exactly, at least in the case of Europe, I don't know the precise situation in Australia and elsewhere, but we know that many NGOs that are chartering boats and then are supporting human traffickers, basically, to get people from North Africa over the Mediterranean to Italy, that they are funded by governments. In the German case, by the German government. We know this is something, by the way, that has not made headlines anywhere. The German Foreign Ministry, we talked about this before, told their embassies and consulates in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and other places that they have to accept non-existent or fraudulent documents or forged documents when issuing visas. So the left wants open borders. They want people to come to your country, and it's not a conspiracy. We basically have the paper trail, or as the modern saying goes, we have the receipts. And the other thing, of course, that is equally important is we got to be very careful when we look at this entanglement of NGOs and the government, because if you live directly or indirectly from government money, you're not really a non-governmental institution. And the second point that is equally important, and this is why I think the right needs to raise their voice, the British people, the European people, the Australian people are not racists. This is not about race. This is about culture. And I'm getting so tired, for example, all this uprising, if you want, against Islam. Islam is not a race. If Islam is a race, then Catholicism is also a race. So every time somebody says something mean about Catholics, then they're also racist. Then the Hannah Montana fan club is a race. So this conflation, this attempt to kind of take a religion / an ideology and then cloak it as a race in order to shield it from criticism. I mean, this is a game that the left is playing very shrewdly, and the right should stop playing along with it. It's not a race, it's a belief system. The thing is, we now actually use the same thinking as the Islamists do, right? The idea that you are born a Muslim and everybody who isn't is basically an apostate. No, you're not. Like you're born maybe in a Muslim family, but at some age, 16, 17, 18, it's your choice. And as is it with any other, if you might be born a Catholic, but you can choose to leave it, to stay with it, whatever it is. But it's not a race. And I'm getting tired that people who criticize a religion and ideology are called racists. The next time somebody says I'm against Nazis, I'm also going to say, oh, you must be a racist. You hate German people. But everybody would say, wait, what are you talking about? It's not the same thing.
And only
the same thing, you can be.
And only you, as a German, can make that joke. But you've got a really good point there, and is that religion is being conflated with race because it makes it easier for those in identity politics to peddle cheap slurs that are completely meaningless in the real world.
Precisely.
And just a little point here for all the progressives. Islam as a religion is not progressive, it is not inclusive, and it is not diverse, okay? It is an all-encompassing political ideology that takes over governments and then issues the rules for those governments. So you won't have any more of the trans flags flying in the streets or any of your marches or any women's rights. All those are gone. But look, back to the posters I was talking about that I saw at the rallies. You can buy these by any means necessary posters from the Socialist Worker Party for about £0.50 each. And I guess they hate capitalism, but they're happy to sell you posters, but whatever. Their website insists that we need to have a war on reform, that is the party for Nigel Farage, and that we need to tear down our borders, as you said. Here's a quote. That has to be met with a militant workers' movement, an anti-racist organisation, united class battles, and the creation of a larger revolutionary socialist forces, because they can offer a real way forward against the people at the top. Now, Ralph, all of that sounds like incitement to insurrection.
No, I think it's true. And the problem here is we have to look a little bit, and I apologize, Amita, this might be a slightly longer answer than usual, and usually my answer is already too long. But I think it's an important one. We have to kind of try to distinguish between really what's going on here between the kind of the groups that you mentioned and, let's say, the groups who are we supporting. There is this idea, right, when it's like that racism is the issue. But the right really is not racist. If you ask any conservative who their favorite philosopher is, most of the time will say Thomas Sowell, who, as far as I know, is a black person. They're anti-gay, right? Are they really? If you look at some of the most popular right-wing figures, Douglas Murray, Dave Rubin, they are gay. As far as I can tell, they have a huge following among conservatives and the right wing. They're anti-Semitic, are they? I think Ben Shapiro would like a word, who's probably the most influential conservative commentator. What really distinguishes the left and the right these days is that one of them are still loyal and believe in the value and the worth of Western civilization, of the nation, of identity, and the other side doesn't. Everything the left does, they are not anti-capitalist because they hate capitalism, they're anti-capitalist because capitalism is Western. They're not anti-Israel because they like the Palestinians, they're anti-Israel because Israel perceives, and I think that is correct, is a Western nation. And under that framework, right, even queers for Palestine make sense. Because the queers know that they can't live a single day in Palestine. But the problem, of course, is, or what they understand, is that the queer, even the queer ideology ultimately is an attack on Western civilization. It doesn't really care about being queer. It's only about, it's a culture against Western civilization. And so it's being pro-Palestine. So under that framework, right, it makes a lot of sense. Environmentalism, the same thing. The left has wholeheartedly signed up to an anti-civilizational, anti-Western program. And this is also an issue with socialism in a sense. But there were socialist movements in the 19th century. There were socialists, but they were still deeply patriotic, like the German socialists. The same, I would say, is true in Britain. But nowadays, they are anti-patriotic, they're anti-nationalist, they're anti-loyal to their own civilization, and that's the true dividing line between left and right. And I think the right must realize this. We always fight the symptoms, but we never fight the true battle, which I think is exactly this. Do you still believe in your civilization and your culture, or don't you believe in it? And the left doesn't, and I hope the right still does.
I'm actually going to throw in there that you're quite right about the patriotism of the old socialists, but there was also at that point in time a movement of socialists that were globalist socialists that believed in open borders and disintegrating the nation state so that they could, spoiler alert, rule the world. It's kind of where we get our Bond villain aesthetic from, because they wanted the same thing, and they wanted to create mass chaos so they could basically rule over the ashes. And we are seeing right now the ashes of Europe. Now, just to take a little bit of a left turn here, Bangladesh right now is on fire. Violence has broken out between Hindus and Islamic extremists, with Islam being the indisputed aggressor. Now, the media doesn't want to talk about this because they cannot pin the violence here on social media. Is Musk being scapegoated by our politicians in the West? Because obviously, Islam's got problems in other parts of the world.
Well, that's a two-part question, I would say. I mean, the first answer I would give is when you look at the little tiff there was between Thierry Breton, who was this EU commissioner who sent this ridiculous letter to Elon Musk, and he was not even reprimanded by Ursula von der Leyen. So you have to be really stupid if Ursula von der Leyen has to kind of, rein you in. But this is just a guy who thinks it's really cool that he can be eye to eye with Elon Musk. This is self-aggrandizement, nothing else. And I think this is what many politicians do. Also, Keir Starmer, they just, this idea is, what Klaus Schwab is for the right, kind of Elon Musk has now become for the left, right? It's this wild and insane supervillain. But you make another more important point, which is we would not get a lot of the information if Jack Dorsey would still be in charge of X. I mean, this is undoubtedly true. I mean, I'm not sure if many commentators, including Donald Trump as the former president and maybe future president, would be allowed back on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, if Elon Musk would not be there. And this is what they hate. I mean, let's be very honest about this. The same with, of course, HDHTV, right? The left hates it. They're losing their monopoly in the media, in the infosphere. And so what are they trying to do? The legal crackdown is going to come. It's coming in Britain. It's going to come in the European Union because they are afraid that they lose their gatekeeper function. And this also dovetails with what you said. So information about the persecution of Christians, who are, by the way, the most persecuted religious group in the world. It's not Islam. And also, of course, where Islam is a perpetrator, as it happens in Bangladesh, as it happens in other parts of the world. I mean, try being a Christian in Pakistan. Try being a Christian in Egypt, and then compare it to being a Muslim in the United Kingdom. Listen, I'm always for mutually assured destruction. And what I mean by this is I'm happy to treat other religions in the way how they treat my co-religionists in countries where they are in the majority. But if we would do this, the world would look quite different. So I'm getting a little bit tired also of the whining sometimes of certain minorities in the West. Because if you are, again, look at it never makes the news. But if you look at how Christians are being treated in Pakistan, if even one person, one minority in the US, in Europe, and the UK would be treated that way, it would be an outrage that would be from The Guardian to The Independent to The Times, would make headlines everywhere. So, I mean, I'm glad that we apply a higher standard to ourselves, although somebody could say that's also a form of racism, because why do we have to live up to a higher standard if supposedly all of us are equal and the same anyways? But this is kind of what bothers me, this constant groveling, this constant apologizing. I'm old enough now and I hope financially, I'm done with it. I'm done apologizing for my civilization. I'm done apologizing for my culture. I think overall Western civilization has done more for the progress of humanity than any other civilization before. The Chinese might disagree. That's their right because they love their own civilization, but I love mine. But I'm done apologizing. I'm done groveling.
I think it's absolutely time for Western civilization to be proud of itself, leading not just the current modern times, but all of human history as the freest, most prosperous and most peaceful civilization ever created. And look, we have to batten down the hatches or it is going to be gone if we're not careful. Ralph Schoellhammer, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for joining us today on Spectator TV.